Hello guys, and you're welcome. And in today's tutorial, what we're going to do is to create a sprite character, and then we're also going to create states to change the state of the animation from idle to run, and then have this little basic slash attack animation. So let's go ahead and begin. So the first thing I'll do is to jump over to itch.io, and right here on the search, I'm going to search for, let's say, free character sprite sheet. So I'm going to search for that, and what I want to do is to get this free character here. So I'll just click on that, and then it tells us it's a 32 by 16 sprite sheet, reducible to 16 by 16. So let's just drag over here, and we can actually see the animations we have here. So we have the idle, the run, and then the attack animation, and we also have a death animation. So let's go ahead and just download this, and I'll just click on no, just take me to the downloads, and I'll just click download again, and I think we should be good to go right now. So we've downloaded this project. It's a zip file, and I'll just go ahead and click this, and what I'll do is just cut these guys like so, and I'll head over to my documents and a folder where I keep my Godot files. It's just a folder called Godot projects, and I'll just right click and create a new folder, and I'll just call that little character animation. And basically that's going to be our little character animation project. So I have this empty folder, but I'll just drop this in my art packs folder. So I also have a folder called art packs, and I'll just paste this over here, and just like that I can actually see my little character animations here. And what I'll do is to just right click on that and say extract all, and click extract. This will extract the sprite sheet. So I've already done that, so I have that already, and this is the one we're interested in, this little character animation.png, because that's what we're going to be importing into Godot. So with that, let's just open up Godot, and I'll just click it here from the taskbar, or you can search for Godot wherever you have Godot installed. So now that it's opened up, what we'll do is just quickly create a new project. So I'm going to go to new project, and I'll just call that little character animation, and I'll just browse to that folder which I created in my Godot projects, and I believe it's the little character animation, and I'll click select this folder, and I'll leave everything as it is by default. I'll leave it on compatibility, and I'll click create and edit. So this is going to quickly create that project. So the first thing we want to do is to organize our project files in our resources folder. Godot loves it when you organize your products, organize your project, just so you can have access to where everything is, where they are, and you can easily find things. So first I'm going to right click on the resources folder and go to create a folder, and I'll call that art, and I'll do the same again, and I'll create a folder for the player character like so. And I believe I should create one for my scenes. So I'll right click, create new folder, scenes, and I'll do the same thing again, create a new folder, and I'll call this scripts. This is just for organization's sake. If you have a little project, you can have everything in one folder. That's good to go. So the next thing I'll do is I want to import the sprite sheet into the art folder. So I'll just minimize this a little bit. And what I'll do is to go over here to our little character animation. Now if you're on Windows, you can do Windows and back arrow, and this will actually open up a 2-window frame, so you can just see where your stuff is. So I just want to drag the little character animation image PNG file into the art file. So I'll just do this, left click and hold, and simply just drag this guy over here. And we can actually see if we refresh this. I'll just close that and put that. If that's still not working, what you can do is to just switch to project list, like so. Now, once you quit to your project sheet, you can just double click on your folder again on the project you're working on. And if we have imported that correctly, we should actually see that update. And I don't believe I did that. So, because usually it's supposed to automatically update. So let's try that one more time. So left click, drag, and just release down here. And good. So I didn't even need to restart the program. I just didn't import this properly. So now that we've done this, let's go ahead and create our main game scene. So I'll click on 3D scene. I'll double click on the node 2D, and I'll just call that our game, like so. And I'll save this into our scenes folder. I'll save it as game.tscn. And next I'm going to create my player scene. So what I want to do is to change this to a character body 2D. So I can just go to change type, and I'll type character body 2D like so. So this type has been changed to a character body 2D. Let's go ahead and save this, and let's call that our player. And we're saving it in our scenes folder, so we have our player. Don't worry about this error. We're actually going to fix this warning because it's giving us a warning right here. So the first thing we want to do is to actually import our sheets into this section right here. But to do that, we need to create our animation. So here we're going to compose a new character animation. So let's just change this to player, and that's going to be our player name. So that's the name of our node rather. So let's add an animation 2D, sprite 2D. So I'll click on this plus, and I'll just search for animated sprite 2D rather, and I'll click create. Now we actually have that animated sprite 2D, so it's asking for a collision here. So let's see what this error is for our player. It said this node has no shape, so it can't collide with anything. So what we can do is to create a shape for our node. So we need to attach a collision shape 2D. So here, I'll just go over here, make sure I'm clicking on the player, and I'll see a collision shape 2D. This defines a region or boundary where your character can be used to communicate with other physics objects. So I'll click on this shape empty, and I'll just click on this new rectangle shape. That should get rid of the error. Now our animated sprite 2D wants our art assets. So if we click on this, it tells us a sprite frame resource must be created or set in the frames property in order for animated sprite 2D to display frames. So let's go over to what it says. So let's go to our animation. Let's click on this empty, and let's click on new sprite frames. And let's click on the sprite frames again to open up the default scene. So now that we have this default scene opened up, what we're going to do is to import our sprite frames by clicking add frames. So let's click on this little character animation and click open. And we could just zoom in here and see what we're working with. So now we actually have these frames. We have 4 vertical and horizontal frames. Let's go ahead and set this to 1, like so. And I'll change this to 2. And then for the vertical cuts, I'll set it to 24, like so. So I have 24 vertical cuts, and I have 2 horizontal cuts. Now the way it came in is that it's kind of like flipped. So basically the vertical cuts are the cuts that are cutting like so. And then we have the horizontal cut like this in case you rotate this counterclockwise by 90 degrees. So we can begin selecting our animations. So I'll start with the idle animation. I'll hold this, left click, and I'll just drag these first 3 frames. And let's click on add frames. And what we can see over here is our little character. Now let me just go ahead and zoom into our character so we can just quickly see how our character looks like, so that we can begin to make a few changes. So here I'll just zoom in, and we can actually see our character, and it's quite blurry. So to fix that, let's go to project, and I'll go to project settings, and here under rendering I'll click on textures and set this to nearest. I'll save our scene. Now we can put the collision shape above. It doesn't really matter where we place it, but we just want to see our character. Now we also notice that the collision shape is slightly wide, so we'll just drag this here, and we can even leave it here for this example. So that's our player character, and we can play this animation to see this idle animation playing. So I think this is not a bad frame, so let's leave it at this frame. And since we've begun to let's actually create the other set of animations, and then finally we can jump in and see what we actually have to do right here. So if we click on our animated sprite 2D, let's go ahead and get back, which we already are on. We can set this to autoplay on load. So this will be the default animation that's playing, and look here, it's set to loop. Sometimes you might not need your animation as a loop, but for this, we've actually set our animation to loop. So let's import quickly the other set of animations. So I'll click here, and what I want to import is the run. So I'll double click on this, and I'll change the animation name to run, hit the return key, and I'll hit this add frames, and I'll click open. And again, I'll just zoom in so I can easily see what we're working with. So I'll set this to 2, and then here 2 by 24. That's how we're going to be slicing this sprite sheet. And I think I'll select from here down to here, like so. So we have 6 frames, we have 7 frames rather. So let's test out this run animation. Okay, that's cool. So let's set this to 8 at least, just to make this slightly interesting. So we have 8 frames and it's set to loop. So let's go ahead and create our next set. So we have our default, which I'm going to name idle, because that's our idle animation. And we can just press play on that, so it automatically play when we click on the animation. And next, let's create our hit animation. So I'll just double click this and call this our hit. Click on this sprite frames to import the sprite frames. I'm sure by now you already got the picture and seen how we can do this. I'll set this to 2 and set this to 24, and I'll just slide down here and select these 2 frames. Basically that's when our player is hit, and if you play that, you can just blink or flash like so rather. And then finally, let's bring in the slash or attack animation. So I'll just call that the slash animation. So with that, let's go ahead and import this. I know this is a very boring stage, but we'll get to the good stuff real soon. So I'll quickly set this to, now this time around, I'll set this to 1. And I'll split this to 24. And let's kind of zoom in and see what we're doing here. Now it's because this sprite sheet, if we set it to 2, it's going to be picking 2 of these, but if we set it to 1, it's going to be picking just 1 of this. So I'll just drag this from here down to here, these 5 frames, and that's going to be our slash animation. And remember, this is just to for demonstration purposes. So and let's set this to a very fast value, and I'll turn off this looping. So I just want this to play once, and he's actually slashed and come back to his slashed position, like so. So let's save this and jump into the action. So what we want to do now is to create a script where we can have access to our animation, to change our animation, and then have access to the keyboard and set our animations. So that's what we're going to be doing next. So let's go ahead and jump to the player, and right here where it says attach script, let's attach this script, and we'll call that player, and we'll save this in the script file. So I'll just go up and go to our scripts and click open and click create. Now this is an empty script file, so for yours you might actually see the ready and the process functions. Don't worry, I'm still going to be creating my ready and process functions. What I'm quickly going to do is to set up my screen size and then also instantiate the player, because right here, if we go to our scenes, let's look at our scenes here. In our main scene, let's right click, and then let's say we want to set this as our default scene. So set as main scene. So each time I play the scene, our game scene is going to be our main scene, like so, but we haven't instantiated our player, so we can't see anything. So let's go back to the game scene, click on this chain icon, and instantiate the player as a child scene of the main scene. So each time we play the game scene, which we're here, and we're playing that as our main scene, we're actually going to see our player. So we can't see our player right here because it's super. The resolution is, let's go ahead and jump to 2D. This is where our player is. He's far way down here, way up here, and we can't actually see our player. So what I'm going to do is to click on this gizmo right here, and we just drag our player like so, and place him in the middle of this screen. Now this is super large, and what I want to do is to quickly set the screen size so we can fix that size right here. So you can see the player is super small, so let's just go ahead and fix that real quick. So over here are the project settings, where we have our window under display. Let's set this to a 640 by 480, and I'll turn on the advanced settings to have a window override, and the width is going to be 1280 by 720. These are just standard resolutions. And for the stretch mode, I'm going to set this to canvas items, and I'll just leave everything at default. Also for our player, while we're selecting our player, let's go over here to our transform, and for our scale, I'll set the scale to 4. And once I click here on the y-axis, it just scale the character 4 times its size. And let's just go ahead and press play. And now we can see we can have a much larger representation of our character. So let's go ahead and, so we've set that size and screen. We're happy with that. So let's go ahead and continue. So let's jump into our script. And this is where we will start creating our script. So the first thing I want to do is to find out how fast the player is moving. So I'll create a variable. I'll say var speed. And I like doing the type hinting. So I'm just going to say this is a float value, and I'll set that to 300. So that's how fast my player is going to be moving. And next, what I want to do is to reference my sprite component and save that as a variable. Basically, this on our player, we can see we have this animated sprite 2D. What I want to do is to store that as a custom variable so I can play the animations. And I'll do that at on ready. Basically, when that scene is ready, I'm going to say var, and I'll call that my sprite underscore component. And I'll set this to equal column and do the type hinting. So this is going to be an animated sprite 2D, and this is going to be equal to, and all I have to do is to drag and drop our animated sprite 2D here. So basically, each time this player node is ready, this sprite component here is going to be set to this custom variable. That's this animated sprite 2D, which is our sprite sheets. These ones here. If we click on our animated sprite 2D, these are sprite frames. It's going to be set to a variable that can reference them, and we can play, we can stop our animation. So that's basically what that is doing. Next, I'm going to create an enumerator to store the states of our animation. So our idle, our run, our slash, and our flashing animation is going to be stored in states. And basically that's how we'll create our state machine. So let's say enum and open a curly brace. And I'll just type our animation name. So we have idle, we have run, we have slash, and we also have our hit animation. And an enumerator simply is a named constant. Constants are values that you don't want to change during when your project is running. For instance, I can say const, I can say temp, or I could just say player health equals 3 or 2. So this is a constant variable. Our player health is not going to change when the game is running, so we don't want anyone cheating or changing things in the program. So that's what this is. So if I have one for player health and I have another constant for the enemy health, and I set this to a value of say 4, instead of having all these, I can have one enumerator called enum where I can pass in these constants. So I can have my player health, and I can have my enemy health and all that. But since these are constants, it's a good thing to put all your constants in a capital uppercase value, just to show that they're constants. But lowercase will work as well. It's just a matter of preference and traditionally how constants are created. So in our first, once we start, what we want to do is to begin to change our states. So let's create a variable. I'll just say var, and I'll call that state, and I'll set that to idle. Basically, when our scene starts, this is going to be the first animation that is going to be called first. So that's going to be our idle animation, which we created right here. So when our scene starts, that's our ready function. So in your func underscore ready, and I think I'll make this slightly large just so everyone can see what we're doing. So I just use Control and plus to make that quite large a bit. So what I'm going to do in our ready function is to pass in the state. So I'm just going to call change underscore state. This is going to be idle. Now change state is a function which we're actually going to create and place in the items we want to change. So I'm just going to create a function. I'm just going to say func change underscore state, and our change state is going to accept an argument. So I'm just going to call that new underscore state, like so. And for now, I'll just say pass so that we don't have this error happening. So what did I just do right here? And what's happening in change state? And what do you call this thing called new state? New state is what is called a parameter. Now, once you have a parameter, it means when you call this function, you can pass in values into this function and won't have a problem. So here we have our idle run slash or hit. We can change our state. Each time we call this change state function, it's going to be idle. A function is nothing more than arranging a group of statements together. If I say print hi, and I also say print hello, like so, and let's pass that into say our ready method, like so. So I'm printing hi and I'm printing hello. If I need to do this a lot of times, rather than keep typing print hi and print hello, we could create a function using the keyword func, and I'll just say greeting, and in this greeting function we'll pass in hi and hello. So I'll cut this and pass this over here and save this. So in our ready function we can just call greeting, and this is going to print hi and hello. So basically that's what a function is. Don't be scared of what a function is. It just helps you group your piece of code together. So now that we have that, I'm also going to do something here in our change state method. So first I'll set my state, which is that variable we created up there, and I'll set it to new underscore state so that when I'm calling this function, we can actually see it here. And I'm going to use a built-in switch case statement. I believe that's what it's called in Python. And I'm going to match each state. Basically, I want to say if I'm in the idle state, do something. Or if the state is equal to run, do something. If the state is equal to slash, do something. And we can achieve that using the keyword match. And then we'll pass in the parameter. So that state. So I want to match this state. So I'll start with the idle. I'll start with the idle. So if we're idle, what do we want to happen? Well, we want our sprite component, which we created here. Sprite underscore sprite component dot play. So we want to get our sprite component.play. So it says it expected an indented block after match. And the reason why this is not working is because I need to indent this gentleman. So I'll indent and also indent this guy. And also you notice there's a problem once you start typing. Let's say for instance, if I say sprite component dot and you're not getting the typing thing, there is something wrong there. So if I say play, we can actually say play, and it should give us a list of our animations. So we have for the idle, we're done for the idle. So let's do one for the run. I'm going to do my colon, hit the return key, and I'm going to say sprite component dot play, and we're going to play the run animation. Oops, that's 1, 2, 3. I'll just hit the arrow key and we have the run animation set up. So let's go ahead and create the slash and the hit. So slash, in fact, we could just cheat right here and copy this like so. So we have one and then we have one more. So I'll call this the slash. I want to play the slash animation, not the run animation. And then we have the, this is going to play the hit. And we'll just do hit. All right, so now that we've done that, what we're going to do next is to create the input that is going to handle our player movement. Because right now we have a boring setup where our player is not moving. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Now what we're going to do is to quickly create the input system that will let us handle and understand what these states are. So we have our idle, run, slash, and hit. But what we want to do is to create our input such that we can move left, move right, we can slash, and we can also attack, basically. So that's our slash. So to do that, let's go to project, and under project settings and under the input map, what we want to do is to create a few actions. So I'll just do that. So here my new action is going to be, let's say, move underscore right, and I'll hit the return key. I'll add another action called move underscore left because I want to move this player to the left. And I'll add a final action called slash because I want to slash. Now we have the actions, we need to assign the events that we want to happen when we press move right, move left, and slash. So for move right, I'm going to press the right arrow key and click OK. And at the same time, I will add another key on move right, and I'll press the D key and I'll click OK as well. So now under the move left, let's go ahead and click the plus to add the move left event. I'll press A and hit OK. And also for the move left, I'll hit that again and then press the left arrow key. And that's our physical key. So we have the A and the left key for move left. And for the slash, I'm just going to hit the space bar or space for attack, and that's it. So we've created our input map, and we can access this input map when we want to code the player. So the first thing I'll do is to create a script down here. I'll just call that, just take this down here so we can have a little space here. And I'm going to call that function. I'll call it, let's say, get input. And in our get input function, let's create a variable to hold a reference if we're pressing the action button. Basically, if we are pressing the right arrow key or the D key, hold that variable. So I'll just say var right is going to be equal to input dot is action pressed. And here we can actually see some of the variables we created. So I'm going to press this one for move right, and I'll quickly do that for our left key. So I'm going to say input dot is action pressed, and I'm going to press the move left. Now the difference between is action pressed and is action just pressed is that is action pressed will continuously return true if we have our hand or our hands on the button, with pressing down that button. Is action just pressed is going to just run this once. So for our slash, we're going to say var slash, and I'm going to set that to let's say input dot is action pressed for pressing the slash. And because the slash is an attack animation, I'm going to release the slash animation when we have released the slash. So I'm just going to say var released slash. That means our hand is no longer on that key. I'm going to say input dot is action just released. That's this one, second one, and we're just going to check if we have released slash. And I'll tell you, and I'll actually show you why I actually did it this way, because it's kind of tricky. So now that this is a character body 2D, it has a built-in variable called a velocity. Basically, this is what I'm talking about. This player is a character body 2D, and it's inheriting from all the properties that exist for a character body 2D. So it has a built-in function called velocity, and you can always check the search help, and you could say character body 2D. And once you return that, if you look down at the properties, you can actually see that it has a lot of these properties, and you can always read up on them. But just know that it actually has a velocity property, which it actually uses, and it also has a move and slide, which will help with wall and slope detection. So that's just by the way, just so that you know that this guy has these built-in functions and these properties like so. So let's go ahead and continue. So to get rid of this, you can just right click and say close documentation, or you can just do Ctrl W to close that. That's fine. And if you, for some reason, you can't see this window right here, maybe you click on this arrow, you can also do Control and the backslash. This will open and close this guy. So since I have just one script, I like to leave it closed, but just know that you can have access to any of your functions you've created by just clicking on this. So it's a very nice shorthand. So next, what we're going to start doing now is to set our player velocity to 0. So I'm just going to say my velocity is going to be equal to 0. Now this velocity and our x velocity, so dot x is going to be 0. This velocity is coming from the character body 2D. So it's not a custom variable, it's a built-in variable. That's why I think it's slightly tinted blue, not fully white. So that's a built-in variable. So we're getting our play velocity. Now what we want to do is to move our player, right? So next, what I'm going to say is if we're pressing right, and by right I mean if we're pressing the move right button, which is the right arrow key, and our position dot x is greater than 0. Basically, it means if, remember our 2D game object, let's go back here and let's go animate sprite 2D. I'll just set this to idle. So if this is if I move this here and I open up the transform, check out what happens to my x. I'm going to set this to 0. So I'm going to start moving this around. I'll set it to like -5, and I'll set this back to 0. So let's click on this and set this to 0. Basically, it means if this is greater than 0, it means we're moving. If anything is moving the character, it means we're greater than 0. It means we're actually moving. And what I'm going to do is to increase my velocity. So let's go ahead and see how we can do that. So we created a variable called speed up here. So what I'm going to do, if I'm pressing right and I notice now my position of x is greater than 0, so my velocity of x, I'm going to add that to the speed. So we're going to be doing this every frame, and to run a function every frame, we need to use the process. So in case it didn't delete yours, I'm just going to say process. Now I'll pass in delta in here, and we're going to call this function. It's going to run every frame, and that's our get input. Like so. So this function is going to be running every frame if we actually pressing the right arrow key. Let's play that just to test and see that everything is working properly. So I'm pressing the left arrow key, nothing's happening. I'm also pressing the right arrow key, and nothing is happening. So let's see why this is not actually responding. And it's actually not working because we need to call the move and slide function right here in our process. So I'll say move and slide, and let's try that one more time. So good. So now we're actually moving to the right. You also notice if we're moving towards the right, we cannot flip our player, but if we go back to our scene and on the animated sprite 2D, I just want to go over here to the offset and this flip H property. So if flip H is on, it means we can flip horizontal. So let's see how we can access that flip H property in our script. So to do that, right here, if we're moving towards the right, we're going to set our sprite flip H. Now the name of our sprite is sprite component. So I'm just going to say sprite component dot flip underscore H is going to be equal to false because we're moving to the right. So we're not flipping this guy to the right because we're moving to the right. We can copy this entire code and do the same thing for when we're pressing left and just flip the direction. Now if we're moving left, it means we're going in the negative x direction. So I'll change this to a minus and I'll set this to true, and we can quickly test this to see what's happening. So I'll just go ahead and press play. So now we're moving, flipping the character, and it's actually not working properly. So let's see why that's happening. So I've said flip H, right? We're saying flip H equals false here, and now we're saying if, so good. So here is supposed to be left. That's why copying and pasting is terrible. So let's go ahead and save this. And if we're actually facing left, we can just set it to left directly and just get rid of this and leave it like so. So now we're changing our velocity, we're taking that to a negative value, and we're flipping our we're flipping horizontally, and we're setting that to true. So let's go ahead and test this. So we're flipping, and this is good. We have our animation, idle animation playing, and that's super awesome. So let's move on. So what can we do from here? Excuse me, guys. How do we improve this? So now we're going to be checking our states so we can set these animation values. So the first thing I'll do to check my state is I'll check if my state is equal to idle and my velocity.x is not equal to 0. Basically, if we're standing still and we are, moving. So let's change our animation to the run animation. If we're standing still and we're moving, If we're moving, it means our x velocity is not equal to 0. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll just say, I think I should add a comment here. I'll just say switch state to run if we are standing still. I think it helps makes the code kind of cleaner. So I'll say if state is equal to, now the double equal sign will check if what is on the left is the same as what is on the right. So I'm checking my state. If it is on idle by default, which is true. So if this is true and our velocity, let's see, our velocity dot x is not equal to 0. Now that's how you do a not equal to 0. What do I want to do? Well, I want to change my state to run. So I'm just going to say change state, and I'll set that to run. Let's save this, and I'll just, oops, so we have a problem here. So it says identifier velocity. It's just a typographical error. So I think this is the proper spelling of velocity. So let's just quickly press, I think it's F6, just to run this. Okay, sorry, I think it should be F5. So let's see. And we can't see our player. So what's happening to our player? So let's go back to our script. And let's set this to a comment. And let's save this and let's play. We have it. So something is happening down here. Something is happening down here that is messing up our player position. So let's quickly look at that. So we're saying if our state is equal to, it should be idle, not run. So let's set this to idle. So basically, if we're standing still, our x is not moving, and if our state is idle. So let's go ahead and see this. So here we're idle, but if I press this, you can actually see our character is running like so. So the running animation is super great. So simple errors, sometimes you need to always check them. So now what we need to do is to set our animation back to running. If we're actually running and we stop running, let's set it back to idle. So if we're running, it means our state is run, and if we've stopped running, it means our velocity is back to 0. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll add a comment. I'm just going to say switch to idle if standing. So I'm going to say if our state is equal to run and our velocity dot x equals 0. So change state to idle. So let's quickly check that. See, there are no problems. So if our state is run and our x is 0, let's do this. So let's save that and let's run. Excuse me, guys. So we have a problem here. Let's see what the problem is. So if our state is equal to idle and if our state is equal to run and our velocity.x equals to 0, let's change our state back to idle. So here we've changed our state to run. So here we're checking if our state is equal to run. Now velocity.x so let's go ahead and see this again. So we're running, we're back to idle. We're running, we're back to idle. So we actually pressed the button for the current scene, which is the player scene, and we won't see anything if we play the player scene. So if we stop, we can actually see that we are indeed switching back to our idle animation. So finally, what we want to do is to do our slash animation. So if we're slashing, So I'll just say if slash. So let's set our state to slash. So I'm just going to say change state to slash, like so. And if we are not slashing, basically if we have released our hands from the slash, so I'm just going to say if slash released, or let's say I said released slash, and basically I'm getting this because I declared this variable up here called released slash. That's this one. So I'm actually calling that released slash. So if we're releasing our hands from slash, let's change our state back to idle, like so. And let's save that and let's run the game. So we have our idle, we can run, we can stop running, we can press slash to attack, we can run and attack, and each time we're releasing that attack, that's going to happen. So yeah, it seems to be working fine. A little glitchy, but it's super fine, and it's glitchy because the way our sprite sheet was organized is that we had to use a space of 2 for our character. So basically that's how you can create a basic state machine using sprite sheets, importing them into Godot, and building a fun little project. I'll just go ahead and set the scale of my character. Go ahead to animated sprite. Alright, so thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. All these files are going to be available on the GitHub page, and I'll try to make them accessible as well. Thank you very much for staying that long. It could be quite challenging and difficult, but with practice, you're actually going to get better. Peace.